Thank you everyone for joining us for this fundraiser. We're going to be doing an educational fundraiser today to try to raise awareness about what people can do to impact the national elections that we're all very concerned about right now, and especially focusing on some of our work at Clean and Prosperous America, our grant program that's leveraging small grassroots orgs to really leverage peer-to-peer and relationship organizing amongst a youth cohort of voters. While we're getting started here, I just want to run you through some of the presenters. My name is Greg Rock. I am the Executive Director of CaPA. I've got a long history of environmental action from lobbying in Washington State, working with a grassroots organization called Carbon Washington, helped advance the first carbon tax to the ballot, really helped me understand a lot about the strengths of grassroots organizations in these types of movements, and have an entrepreneurial background as well, doing some business efforts and a background in academia focused on sustainable energy engineering. We're also going to be hearing from Bill McClain, who is our Research and Marketing Director and one of the co-founders of Clean and Prosperous America. Bill has led a lot of really exciting branding efforts, including Clarisonic and Sonicare Toothbrush, which I'm sure you've both heard of. And he's currently a professor at University of Washington. And he's really leading our polling and researching a lot of our effort to identify what messages and themes can move what types of voters this election cycle. We're going to hear from Emilia Jones, who is our grant program director. Emilia has a lot of experience working at both small grassroots organizations as well as large institutional organizations like the state of Washington. She has been doing an amazing job going through over 100 different grant proposals, elevating the best of the best for our consideration, so that we're getting really good programmatic work, as well as working with the grantees after they've been awarded, so that they have the tools and resources they need to be as successfully as possible. Our headline speaker today is really an exciting speaker. Simon Rosenberg is someone we've had the pleasure of working with over the past couple of months. He's a prominent American political strategist. If you Google him, you'll find all sorts of great information. He is the founder of the New Democratic Network, as well as the New Policy Institute. Simon is actually known for coining the term millennial. So he has been working on this youth audience for a very long time. And we're going to be hearing a lot of exciting stuff about the landscape in the national stage right now. So for today's program, as mentioned, we're going to have those two short presentations from Bill and Emilia talking about what we've been doing at CaPA. We're going to have a 10-minute presentation from Simon about the political landscape. Then we're going to save a large chunk of time for Q&A. If you have questions as you're watching presentations, just go ahead and type that question into the Q&A box. So if you drag your mouse down to the bottom of the Zoom screen, you should see a chat box and a Q&A chat box. So ideally the questions go in the Q&A chat box. And if you have any administrative questions or other things of that nature, you can drop them in the regular chat box. I do want to note today's event will be recorded. We are going to do some hand raising for verbal questions after we get through some of the text questions. So just wanted to mention that. And again, really our goal today is to educate you about what are some of the critical national races and how you can impact them. And certainly we've got a strategy on how we think grassroots can really engage and impact this election. And finally, I want to turn the table over to our co-founder and board chair, David Giuliani. David is most well known for inventing the Sonicare toothbrush, but he has over 20 US patents. He has been very active in the environmental community here in Washington State. He founded the Washington Business Alliance and the Low Carbon Prosperity Institute, which are really focusing on how we can have a strong and resilient economy while also combating climate change head on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to David.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, friends and colleagues, for joining us today. Last year, Bill McClain and I were sitting around getting all worked up over the upcoming election. And it occurred to us our entrepreneurial methods were very successful with the Sonicare toothbrush. We were able to turn it into the fastest growing private company in the US without spending a lot of money on advertising. And we know the campaigns spend the vast majority of their funds on advertising. Advertising is what people do when they can't find something better to do. So what could we find that would be better? we hired a research company and a message development company and began our quest. Looking for, well, here's an analogy. In the Northwest, these days, it's the blackberry picking season. A lot of the blackberry patches get picked over pretty quickly. So one strategy is to look for that blackberry patch that most people have overlooked. And in that case, the blackberries are, as they say, ripe for the picking if you approach them in the right way. If we could find 1 million or 2 votes that potentially had not been tapped by the normal sources, that could be big. So imagine how we felt when we found 30 million potential voters that the normal methods seem to have overlooked. We learned about them and learned that we could find ways to approach them and they would respond in a favorable manner. So Bill, will you tell us about our magic blackberry patch, please?
Thank you, David. We did identify an untapped population of potential voters. So I'll share my screen so I can share our findings. Working with our team, which includes Hemispheres Research and Rupert Creative, we discovered that within the population of 92 million Americans between the ages of 18 and 39, there is a big opportunity with over 30 million who fit our definition of ambivalent young voters in non-urban areas. Now, our definition of ambivalent young voters in non-urban areas means 18 to 39 in open areas, small towns and suburbs, not near major metro areas, who are undecided about whether to register, whether to vote, maybe who to vote for. So we conducted a nationwide survey, followed by a series of focus groups, followed by another quantitative survey, this time fielded in 3 swing states, to understand how they think, what matters to them, what might motivate them to vote. And what we found, we learned a lot. We learned that they're fiercely independent. They don't follow politics. They don't trust politicians. They don't care to be a member of any political party. In 2016, Generation Y voted overwhelmingly for President Obama, and yet just 4 years later, they voted decisively for President Trump. Now, our survey shows that this year they are leaning left to Joe Biden and to the Democrats. We also learned that they are motivated by local issues. Twice as many say that their vote counts more in local elections than in national ones, and that's why we're pursuing a down ballot strategy. For example, here in Arizona 6, 1 ballot can impact 6 competitive races, from local all the way up to the White House. What might motivate these ambivalent young voters in non-urban areas to vote? We learned that what's especially powerful is the intersection of pollution, health, and jobs. And we learned that they seek unity. Trump bashing just doesn't work with this audience. They tune out. They're responsive to positive messages, to messages about cooperation, of working together to move our clean, green economy forward. Now, we've published our research and our recommendations in a candidate playbook. It's on our website, and we've shared this playbook with the DCCC, the DSCC, the DLCC, leadership and other organizations as well. We're also sharing this playbook with this information with our grassroots partner organizations in swing states to help them be even more effective in reaching this untapped pool of voters. So Emilia, what are you hearing from our grassroots partners?
Thank you, Bill. Well, we are incredibly excited to be deploying our 2nd round of grant making to organizations in these top priority states who are working to turn out youth voters. We made sure to do our research well, and we reached out to even small community groups so that we wouldn't miss a single great partner opportunity. And so far, we really have not been disappointed. Proposals are still coming in, but so far we're looking at 50 applications for this round from our priority states, adding up to a net request of almost $1 million. And we know that from our first round of grant making, CaPA's support is effective. And that's largely because we're not just giving away money. We're also identifying and filling gaps for these organizations with our grassroots toolkit. And that consists of our campaign management experience, new research on the ambivalent youth, as Bill discussed, and free access to several digital tools that can really help these organizations expand their voter outreach. These are a few examples of organizations that received a $5,000 grant and access to these tools from CaPA in our first round of grant making. And in just a few months, they were able to accomplish a ton. And that's even though most of them had to significantly adjust their voter outreach plans because of the pandemic. The grant proposals we're seeing for round 2 are equally impressive, if not more so. These organizations that we're hearing from have ambitious goals, and they have the wherewithal to meet them. And that includes the larger organizations with a national scope, like Voto Latino. It includes the medium-sized organizations like Seeding Sovereignty, which is reaching out to Indigenous youth across the country, and smaller community-based organizations like CASE in Central Arizona. I want to highlight for you a few of the most innovative and compelling proposals that we've received that we are especially excited about. Wisconsin Conservation Voters sent us a really impressive voter outreach plan centered around relational organizing. And that's young people reaching out directly to their friends to encourage them to vote. It's a model that's been proven to be much more effective than cold calling or cold texting. The pyramid scheme is our term for it, not theirs, but we think it's a pretty good way to describe the approach. They hire youth fellows who then each recruit 10 other young leaders who then connect with 10 to 15 of their friends to encourage them to vote, and so on. So there's a potential for massive scaling of voter outreach, all with this peer-to-peer, friend-to-friend model. One of our current grantees, who has applied again this round and has been an absolutely terrific partner, is the Alliance for Climate Education, ACE. They work nationally, but here they're focusing on CaPA's top 2 priority states of Arizona and North Carolina. And they're using a proven combination of outreach strategies, calling, texting, postcard writing, and relational organizing to mobilize and expand their youth network. They'll also be supporting a coalition of youth-focused organizations nationwide that are all turning out young voters around a message of climate change this November. So any funding that we're able to provide to ACE is also passed along to amplify more of these efforts. The Delta Sigma Theta sorority was a big surprise for us, and it's a great example of one of these organizations that might float under the radar of the usual political outreach, but is really impressive. They have a great track record of engaging young voters in rural Georgia, and they have creative and detailed plans to safely inspire those voters to vote this November. One of those plans is their voter registration drive-bys. These will be fun tailgate party type events where volunteers bring their cars for a socially distanced get out the vote tailgate party. And the cars will have magnets with voter registration QR codes so folks can come and safely scan the QR code and register, all while social distancing. They'll be doing Facebook Live events led by students for students to reach out to these rural young voters. And they're running a motorcade to vote, which will be a socially distant parade of cars and motorcycles all going to polling places together. Finally, another one of our grantees that has applied for a second round and has also been just an incredible partner is Seeding Sovereignty. They are an Indigenous women-led organization currently working nationwide to engage Indigenous youth in politics and get them registered to vote. They're already using several of the digital tools that we've been able to provide to them for free to power their Get Out the Vote campaign called Radicalize the Vote. And we're really, really excited to be supporting and hopefully supporting more this Indigenous women-led organization. But it's probably no surprise that that does put them at a disadvantage when they look for funding. They've told us that their greatest challenge is philanthropic inequities because the majority of funding currently goes to white-led organizations and very little goes to Indigenous-led organizations like this. So when we're able to support an organization like Seeding Sovereignty, we're not only amplifying their impact, we're challenging those inequities, and we're putting the resources where they're actually needed the most. After looking at all these grant proposals and applications, I really want to fund the majority of them. There's so much good work being done here. So what it comes down to now is funding the best of the proposals we've received with the funds that we're able to raise now.
Thanks, Emilia, for that really good recap of some of the great work that you've been doing on the grant program. You know, this really is critical work, and it's appropriate time to remind that this is a fundraiser. We'll drop a donate link in the chat so you can access that at your leisure. You know, I will just say, you know, having worked with a lot of grassroots organizations over the past 5 years, I see a lot of that same sauce built into a lot of the grant proposals that we've reviewed. These are small, scrappy orgs. They're dealing with kind of a bootstrap budget. And just a little bit of money can greatly enhance their outreach and availability. And I just want to remind that all of the money that we are soliciting today is going to the grantees and the toolkit resources we're providing them. So none of the funding that we're soliciting is going to the operational requirements of CaPA. And that really is a huge benefit to get rid of all the soft costs associated with developing and producing and targeting these grants where they should go. So it can really make your money go further. As you can see, we've done a lot of work to locate the best grants, provide the tools to enhance their work, and focus that work in the most politically advantageous regions. But we really need your help to now scale that work up. So I do hope you will consider donating. If you are looking to do a tax-deductible donation, we also have pathways to get money directly to C3 organizations. So reach out to me directly if that's an interest for you. But now I want to turn the stage over to Simon, who's going to walk us through just how important this is on the national stage.
Hey, thanks, Greg, and thanks everybody for being here. And it's really a pleasure to join this remarkable team. It's been fun being part of this project, and I'm here really for two reasons. I joined as an advisor to this work for two reasons. First of all is that climate, right? I mean, I think over the next 25, 30 years of our work in America, whatever political stripe you're in, this transition to a low carbon future is going to be one of the 2 or 3 big projects that all of us are going to have to undertake. And I really was looking for a way to play a more meaningful role in this debate. And what better way than to create more climate voters, to give us more advocacy capacity so that when Joe Biden wins in a few weeks, that we're going to have a much higher likelihood of success of actually passing a very ambitious agenda and moving the country rapidly into a better future. But the second reason I joined this team is because they're really doing incredible work. I think this is a great project. It's super strategic. It's run by successful business people who are making every dollar count. And I was incredibly impressed with the strategic focus and the desire by David and Bill and Greg and Emilia and the whole team to find a way of adding value, to go into places that weren't crowded, right? That weren't chasing the same set of voters that everybody has been chasing. And they spent, as David discussed and Bill discussed, they spent a lot of money, frankly, and a lot of time trying to figure out how to go to an uncrowded place. And this idea of the ambivalent voter is somebody who helped put the word millennial on the map 15 years ago and did the first polling of this generation and helped create the idea of a generational identity in American politics. This work is deeply consistent with everything that we try to do 15 years ago, because what we found was another piece of this cohort that's hard to reach. I mean, the way to think about political money and political campaigns is that we often operate with scarcity. We often don't have a lot of money, our campaigns. And so we have to target a very small number of people. In this election, that's not what's going to happen here. We're in an election of plenty, and it means that we can be more ambitious. We don't have to settle for a small number of targets. We can try to go win in places and target groups geographically and demographically that we may not have been able to do before. And the Biden campaign raised, what, $50 million in a couple days? I mean, these are extraordinary numbers. The money that's being raised in the Senate races right now, we're raising as much money in a quarter as campaigns used to raise in a 2-year period, just a few election cycles ago. And so as an advisor to the GCCC in 2018, and I was the top outside advisor to the flipping of the House in 2018, one of the big cultural changes we made was to operate with a sense of being able to go have enough resources, enough strategic capacity, enough talent to be able to go on offense and go and win in places that we can't traditionally win. This project is very much in that vein and in that spirit. We're going after a target group of voters in these nested districts, these highly leveraged districts in states like Iowa, Georgia, North Carolina, Arizona. It's not Minnesota, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, places that are going to be heavily crowded with all of the traditional center-left groups that have been working in those states for decades. We're going into states that we don't know how to win very well. These are states that we've been frankly disappointed in recent elections. And so what we're talking about in terms of your money and where it will go into the most critical battleground states that are left on the map that are really going to determine who wins the presidency and who wins the Senate. And it's also with a group that hasn't been spoken to. And I'm not going to put up my slides, but just to give you a flavor of why this matters so much, is that among undecided voters, if you look at national polling right now, 8 or 9% is usually the number of people that are undecided. Among people under 45, that number is as high as 20% in some of the polling. A lot of the people that are left who haven't made up their mind who they're going to vote for or whether they're going to vote are people in this broad cohort. And that's why this late expenditure, this highly targeted outreach, right, this really savvy and smart narrative and storytelling that Bill and the team found through their market research, I think has an ability to be incredibly impactful as you make a decision about where your last dollars are going to go, right? Because look, you have so many good places to give. And my argument here is this is highly leveraged, it's super effective. We're reaching voters that are open to hearing from us now. We're now at plus 25, plus 30 with under 45 voters. 20 years ago, under 45 voters were dead even between the two parties, right? And so this group wants to hear from us. We have the tools to reach them. They aren't hearing historically. They haven't heard historically from lots of other groups. So we're sort of new in there. And we can have, I think, a huge impact with your help and support tonight. So my job is to introduce David and bring back David into the conversation, and who's going to be updating you on some additional parts of this great project.
Well, folks, I'm sure you can tell how it is we're so happy working with Simon. He has perspective and knowledge and enthusiasm that's made us all work even harder. So back to this question about how do we spend our political and social money? I have 3 criteria that I find myself using when I am asked. And when I get to yeses on all 3, then I'm in a pretty happy place. First is, will this make a really big difference? And you've heard today why this can make the big difference. So the $1 million that we're spending on these field activities, 100% goes to potentially switching some things that wouldn't necessarily go in our direction. And even if they were, we're strengthening those organizations that can help us hold those territories. So the next question I find myself asking is this going in the right direction? Is there a long-term implication? And unlike campaign money that tends to go into ads that kind of go poof at the end of the day, like yesterday's newspaper, these investments persist in their value. Each organization, each young leader that we've cultivated gives us yet another rung up on the future. And the future comes fast. In 2022, there'll be a lot of forces trying to put us back out. So our ability to move our agenda forward with our new youthful voters is huge. The third part that really helps me get to a really happy place when I write a check is how do I feel about it? And I just love the feeling that I get looking at the kinds of organizations and the people in them, realizing that sometimes our investments, like in these tools, one group told us that because of our tools, her productivity was improved by 4 times. By the way, most of these organizations are run by young women. As someone who looks to the future for my grandchildren, I feel so good about the youth. And within, say, a 10-year period, we can take what we're starting and rebuild America with a new generation of leaders that focuses on cooperation and positivism. And we can put this nasty era of political fighting, warfare behind us as if it's just something as a relic in the history books. So I'm really pleased when I think about this. It gives me the same kind of feeling I had when we were launching Sonicare. I had this feeling that we were about to do something that was going to change the future of the world. In that case, it was oral health. In this case, it's probably America and certainly the climate movement. So I hope we've given you the perspective that gets you to 3 yeses, and that you contribute whatever you can today to our cause. Now, I understand that we have Joe Bonfiglio from ED Action. That's the political wing of the Environmental Defense Fund with us. Joe, can we switch over to you?
Yeah, hi David. I hope you guys can hear me. Amazing turnout for this, and thrilled to be joining you. Just a few points. Again, my name is Joe Bonfiglio. I run EDF Action. EDF Action is a 501c4 and super PAC combo that has been around for about 14 years, attached to EDF, which has been around for well over 50. This is our 4th cycle doing politics. And I set this up because about a year ago, I got a chance to start working with David, Greg, and Bill, and joining them on this journey to where you see the work today. And I gotta say, it was just thrilling to have a fresh set of eyes and a set of big brains tackling a political puzzle that is fundamentally different election to election. And for an old political hand like me, who has been doing this for a while, to be able to pass information, research, thinking back and forth with the team has been fantastic. But now it's time to get down to talking to voters, and there are a bunch of ways to do that. And we know, and they know, the best way to do that is as hyper-local as you can get, people that know not just the turf, but the people they're talking to. And we have to move as many people that are going to align behind a progressive agenda, that care about climate, to the polls as we possibly can. Lots of ways to do that, but I think that this crew has figured out one of the best ways to do that, and to move money to groups that are on the ground and that are about to rock and roll. So this is work we do not do, but look to find partners that are simply excellent at it. So today and tonight, I get a chance to be Oprah, which I'm not, but my Oprah moment is this. We're going to seed this program with a $100,000 challenge grant from EDF Action to get the ball rolling, and I hope inspire your political philanthropy in this moment that is critically necessary. So with that, Greg, turn it back to you.
Well, thank you so much, Joe. That is obviously a tremendous level of support for us. $100,000 will go a long way with a lot of grants. We've got a long way to go to our $1 million drive. But I think everyone should recognize on this call that, you know, this is the round one. The money that you give today is going to go to the best of the best grant proposals that we found. And now, thanks to the generous match from EDF, every dollar you give is going to create $2 for each one of these grantees. So I really hope you will consider donating something to these organizations that we are funneling money to today. With that, we're going to switch over to a Q&A session. So if you have questions, please type those into the Q&A section, and then we'll switch over to a hand raise in a minute. While some of those questions are coming in, I want to kind of queue one more up for you, Simon. I think something for me that was really interesting to see watching over the last year and learning more about national politics is just how much the state races change. What we thought was going to be the swing states 9 months ago are bending strong left and looking much more secure. So I'd love it if you could talk a little bit about some of the traditional swing states, Michigan and Wisconsin, and what's changed there, and what you think that means for Biden's potential, and what you think that means for potentially winning the Senate back, because I think that's on a lot of people's mind now as the map gets more feasible.
Listen, every election is unique. I mean, I've been working in national politics since 1988. I've worked in several presidential campaigns, advised the DCCC, all that, but every election is unique and different and has its own contours, its own ways, right? And this election, we have to recognize, first of all, that Joe Biden is now averaging 50-51%. Only 2 presidential candidates in the modern era have been at this level above 50 at this point, and they were Nixon in 72 and Reagan in 84. And both of those elections turned out to be enormous victories, were landslide wins. And I think that, as Nate Silver said the other day, there's a higher likelihood that this election looks like 1932, right? An election that gave the Democrats the majority in the House for 60 years, than Trump winning. And this is nothing like 2016. No one should view this election as anything like 2016. And I'll give you a couple stats. I mean, Hillary was never ahead in that race by the margins that Biden's up now. And Biden's also over 50. He's up at 51 now in the 538 aggregate, the average. And at 51, he wins the Electoral College. Trump is going to have to get up to 48, 49, 49.5 to have a chance to win the Electoral. I'm very bullish in the sense that, we're not going to. This isn't 2016, because what happened in 2016, and everyone brings this up, is that there was a combination of going into states that we hadn't won while also not staying in to win, right? There were significant strategic and tactical errors made by the Clinton campaign. Those are not being made by the Biden campaign. They are fully in those core states we need to win, of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin in particular, right? Those are the 3 kind of anchor states. But remember, we did unbelievably well statewide in 2018 in all of those states. We won House races. Gretchen Whitmer won all women statewide electeds in Michigan. And, those states Wisconsin was close, but Pennsylvania and Michigan have never really been closer than 7, 8, 9 points at any point during this cycle. Wisconsin was 2-3 points. It's now up to 7, 8, 9. And so what it means is we have the luxury, with the resources the campaign's going to have, to move into new geographic and demographic areas where we can go on offense and claim territory that we need to have an even bigger mandate as we go into 2021. We can do both. The point is, we have enough talent and enough resources to both lock down the stuff we need and to win the stuff and that we haven't won before. And so to me, the 4 states that CaPA picked, where they're sort of putting their stake in the ground, of Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, and the presidential, those are all reach states. We haven't won those before. Those are going to be, right now, those are the battlegrounds, right? Those are where the fight really is based on the current polling. All of them are close. Although I think that we are seeing Arizona, to me, feels like it's getting better and better there. But if you add then Iowa as a 4th state, you're talking about, in those 4 states, those are 5 Senate races. And, we're looking good in Arizona. We're looking good in Colorado. We're looking good in North Carolina in the Senate races. And if we can win Iowa and Maine, in addition to those races, then we win the Senate. The Senate flips. Georgia, right now, there's a new poll out today that John Ossoff's ahead over Senator Perdue in Georgia. And so the 2 Georgia races could also be very competitive. So what you're getting in these 4 states, we're not, we're playing in other places too, but where the concentration is, right, are in the highest impact states in both the presidential and in the Senate. This is where we want late money to go, is the states that are in play now, not the states that we thought were going to be in play in January. Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, I don't know that they're going to be competitive states in this election any longer, given just the trend lines and where they've gone. It's shocking, but it's just where the data is, where the competitive states are today for both the president and the Senate are these states that we've identified. And if we had one more, we could do the main Senate race, right? That would be the, the additional thing. But, Teresa Greenfield's up by 3-4 in Iowa. I could go through all the races, but exciting opportunities. And as again, when the other side is stumbling, you go on offense, you spread them thin. This is how we won the House back in 2018, right? In 2016, we played in 35 races. In 2018, we played in 80 races. We won 40. We won a net win of 40 in the House. We spread it, lessened the Republican financial advantage. They had less money to put into each individual race, and we were able to outraise them in many of these races. The same thing's going to happen in the presidential race. Biden, I bet they're going to announce on Friday that they've raised $150 million since Kamala got picked, some astronomical number, which is going to put us way ahead of Trump in terms of resources. Well, it would be silly to keep spending all that money on TV ads in Wisconsin. If we have the resources, we got to spread the playing field and weaken what is a tactically and strategically terrible Trump campaign and really break them apart and win as big a margin as we possibly can in order to advance our agenda and to put stake in the heart of Trumpism, for all time. I don't know if that's what you wanted, Greg.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. And a question came in. What is our particular focuses? Simon made it very clear. Arizona, North Carolina, Georgia, and Iowa. Arizona and North Carolina are tier 1. Georgia and Iowa are tier 2. And then we also get in tier 3, which is kind of more of that blue wall where we are also still doing grant activities, really focusing on phenomenal proposals that we receive. And those states include Maine, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Texas, Florida, and Colorado. So we do have a pretty broad net, but we're really focusing our resources on the most impactful proposals and the most impactful regions. We had another question come in here. I think this one will be for you, Emilia. One of the people like the combination of short-term impact versus long-term benefits in our targeted approach. But can you provide some promising example or two of how your grantees would reach, influence, and activate this ambivalent youth audience?
Yes, absolutely. So one of our current grantees that's also applied again in this second round is an organization called CaPA's in Minnesota. And they specifically are a Latinx-led organization that does outreach to the Latinx community. And I think what they've done really highlights that the key is messaging, and it's messaging correctly for their audience. So their first order of business when we started supporting them was to do some research, do some message testing, and see what messages about climate change and the importance of voting resonated best with the Latinx youth that they were reaching out to. And then once they had those best messages and those best practices that they learned from testing it, they created this really fantastic English and Spanish voter guide and voter resources online on their website. And now they're using some of the free digital tools that we've given them access to. They're going to be calling, text banking, they're doing social media, some really great video for media pushes to get that message out to their audience. There's a lot of other organizations that are also working on that model. And I think it's just a great approach that highlights what Bill is talking about of reaching the ambivalent youth by speaking their language, by speaking the messages that they are most interested in hearing and saying the things that are most important to them, not just assuming that the usual messaging, the usual lines are necessarily going to work for all communities.
Thanks, Emilia. And we have a kind of a technical question. If we donate to our PAC, can you also accept corporate matching programs? It's probably a question more associated with your corporate match program, but yes, is the soft answer. If there is a pathway where they need to have a certificate beyond what is provided from an online donation link, you can just reach out to me directly and we can make sure we get those logistics correct. We would love to access any corporate donor matches that you can create so that this, instead of being $1 turning into $2, it's $1 turning into $3, which would be fantastic. I dropped my my email into the chat, and anyone can reach out to there. So we got a question that's come in. What keeps you awake at night? What do you worry about goes wrong, and all of a sudden Trump's still president?
That's for me, Greg.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's him preventing a free and fair election and a normal transfer of power, right? I think that's the, I mean, I think we're going to win the election if the election were allowed to happen. I mean, some of the numbers I was going to give you earlier is that, we won the 2018 election by 8.6 points. Joe Biden's margin right now, and the averages is about 8.4. It's a very similar place. The congressional generic, which is, will you vote Democrat or Republican for the House or for Congress, is between 7 and 9. It's a very similar number. This wants to be an 8 or 9 point race. And I just don't know that Trump has an issue set where he's polling up in the 40s and 50s that he's identifying himself with that can drag him up. And we also have to acknowledge the Biden campaign is doing a great job, right? This is a well-run, capable campaign. The way they've handled this, the reinvention of the convention has been incredibly dexterous and impressive. And so I feel like we're in good hands here. And Kamala was a great pick, right? So I think the big thing I worry about, and what I've spent time talking to the campaign about, is setting up a second unit that is worried about all this other stuff and how he manipulates our system in some ways to not allow a free or fair election and a normal transfer of power. I think we are seeing with the post office stuff just a level of betrayal of everything that's made this country great that's unimaginable. And I think shame on us in some ways for being surprised after what happened with the cheating in 2016, with the cheating in the Ukraine thing in 2019. I don't know that we really were ready for all of this. And I don't know how that happened, but we need to punch back as hard as we can, because if we don't stop him, he's going to continue to escalate. That's what happened in 2016. So this fight over the post office the next few days, the Congress and Pelosi, I think, engaging really significantly. This is a really important fight, equal to the things that are happening in the traditional campaign. We've got to show Trump that we're willing to push back and to prevent harm reduction, right, on our democracy, and also to make it, if he's able to roll us, he's got a big incentive to continue to escalate and do even more outrageous things. And we've got to, that's why this battle over the post office is going to be, I think, really consequential in the next few days.
Thanks, Simon. So we have another logistical question coming in. If people want to share this information with friends and families and encourage them to donate, we absolutely appreciate that and encourage it. One great resource is, of course, our website, cleanandprosperousamerica.org. The other is that after we package up this video, we'll be sending you a follow-up email sometime next week that will have the video link. And so if someone wants to watch the webinar and get a kind of a recreation of what we did today, they could watch in that format. But certainly encourage people to go to our website. Everything we do and more than what you learned on this webinar is available there. So we've got a question here that's come in. Simon, how does Simon see the potential for coordinating with the Poor People's Campaign as per the New York Times article last Sunday review by William Barber and Johnson Wilson Hargrove?
I'm going to admit I didn't see that article, so I want to be a little bit careful. You mean this project, or do you mean the how this project can coordinate with them, or is it with the?
So this is coming in from Menno. Menno, do you want to? If you click the raise your hand, I can actually let you speak, and then you can recharacterize this a little. We'll pivot now a little bit to some of the hand raising. So I'm going to allow you to talk, Menno. Go ahead. Oh, unmute, sorry. One second here. I think we're double clicking.
Okay, here we go.
There you go.
Yeah, the article came out in last Sunday's New York Times, and it was about the Poor People's Campaign, which I vaguely remember something about in the late 60s, but has been revitalized by William Barber, who heads up Repairers of the Breach, and it was also co-authored by Jonathan Wilson Hargrave. And I was wondering to what extent some of the groups that are representing poor people in this country who, as we all know, do not vote anywhere close to the, the gap between voting rates by poor people or low income people is like 20 points below that of average to above average income people. And so, you know, the big story in there was the amazing success that Andy Bashir and his coalition managed to pull off last year by taking on and taking over the Kentucky governorship in a predominantly red state. And much of it revolved around organizing and coordinating with groups, grassroots groups like you've mentioned, throughout the state of Kentucky, probably over a much longer period of time. You know, I think some of their activities date back 5 or 6 or maybe even longer.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you see any potential as you think about what we're doing here to reach out to the youth vote, whether you also see potential for mobilizing, or do you see that happening in these core key swing states to mobilize poor people and working people, you know, low income working people?
It's a great question, and I think that, you know, this issue of, you know, one of the important things people should realize that we had very high turnout in 2018. It was almost a general election level turnout, and youth turnout was way up as a percentage, right? So young people are engaged, they're paying attention more so than they have been in the past. And I think that I think what's going to be my simple answer is that with more resources and better campaigns, we have the ability to do more, right? And to imagine claiming territory and turning over voters. I mean, the voter participation rate in the United States is a global embarrassment for us. The number of people that, you know, vote. The winner of the presidential election will only get about 30% of the vote of all eligible voters in the United States. And if the premise of our government is that you need the consent of the governed, I mean, the question is, with such low turnout rates, is the system still providing consent in the way that the founders wanted to? And so I do think that one of the reasons that I've joined this project, in part because I have a lot of experience with millennial and youth-oriented strategy, is that these kinds of efforts that are going and pulling people who are low propensity voters into voting is super, super important work. It's always the work that never got done. It was always the thing that was too, you know, we have these other targets we got to get to first, right? We always go back to habitual voters, right? But because of modern communications and modern, you know, stuff that you were hearing, the way that grantees operate, we can, all of us collectively, right, start to chip away at this low voter turnout thing. It's my view that one of the reasons that people have stopped voting so much is that we stopped asking them, right? That we're spending all of our money on a very small number of voters. And even think about California, right? I mean, California hasn't had, this massive state hasn't had a competitive presidential, gubernatorial, or Senate race in like 30 years, right? And so large sections of the country have been left out of the national conversation. Huge numbers, huge percentages of demographic groups have been left out. I will tell you that the Democratic Party today understands this, right? They know this is a problem. And in part, it was a function of television, right? The way that television operated. Some of this had to do with the advertising stuff that was available to us. Digital advertising, our incredibly aggressive movement in this digital age that we've seen over the last few months, we can do more to reach underserved folks or targets that we didn't used to get to. I think that's sort of the best and most accurate way. And that's why I'm so enthusiastic about this project. We are speaking to people that are open to hearing from us right now. They don't like Trump, they don't like pollution, they're not so sure about the Democrats, they're not so sure about politics. We figured out ways to talk to them in ways that are consistent with how they want to be spoken to, educating candidates on the ground, close to them to do so. This is a really, really smart project, and I hope all of you will give it a little bit of support. It's also the kind of project that can really make a difference at the end. These are voters that tune in late, right? We're not too late to be reaching these folks with these groups.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for that great question, Mema, and the response, Simon. So we can just go ahead and raise hands. We still have a lot of people on the call. A few people dropped off, but we still have about 70 participants. So just go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question and want to interact. We've got another, 8 minutes or so till the top of the hour when our scheduled kind of close time is. But we will stick around later if you guys want to keep chatting about stuff. Simon will have to run. He's got a radio interview later today. Busy man, always lots of people wanting to talk to him.
Yeah.
While we're waiting for maybe someone to raise their hand, Bill, I think maybe it's worth maybe expanding a little bit on the non-urban young voters and how we think these voters are going to break, because that hasn't been consistent over the past elections, but our polling indicates that these folks are going to break for Biden, and talk through a little bit of that research and some of those findings.
Yeah, we, our survey work was done in January and then again in April. The second survey in April was fielded after the pandemic shut everything down. So we got an updated view on how these ambivalent young voters in non-urban areas are breaking. And as you can see from the slide, they are leaning left, but a lot has happened since then that logically should push them even further in our direction. A lot of things have happened with the pandemic and with social justice that certainly has activated voters between 18 and 39 across the country. How that, what kind of distinctions we see between urban voters in urban areas and non-urban areas. We haven't done that research as yet. We're interested to do exactly that. But logic tells us, my gut tells me that, that everything that's happened since April is only going to exaggerate the left lean that we saw in our survey. So I don't know if Simon, if you have any further insights from Circle.
Two quick points on this. And I do sit on the board of Tisch College at Tufts University, my alma mater, which houses Circle, which is the preeminent youth research organization in the country. But I'll just say two things to fill in something Bill said that I want everybody to hear is that, this is, when we began this, or when we started rolling this out 6 weeks ago or so, two things have happened that are really, really important to validate the findings itself, right? First is that we believed that the way to speak to these voters on the offensive side was to talk about clean jobs and economic opportunity. Joe Biden right now came out with his plan, his expanded plan, where they're now saying our jobs plan is our climate plan and our climate plan is our jobs plan. It could have been written by Bill, right? I mean, like literally the language was so similar in its orientation that we really chose this as validation. The second part of that piece is that I was on a call with Greg Schultz, who is the chief strategist for the campaign and ran the primary campaign for Biden. And he was asked about what's your youth strategy? And he said, it's our jobs and climate strategy. And so I was doing headstands, right, when I heard that, because that was similar. And then the other piece that matters so much as validation is that Trump continually talks about his deregulation, right? And how he's freeing up people to basically pollute the water and the air that we all breathe and drink from. And pollution, local pollution, is really a big deal to these voters. So we had two incredible national external validations to the research that had been done, even after we started rolling this out. And it's really important to realize that, because it means that we're swimming, with the current. We're not swimming against it. And the national backdrop reinforces and opens up this terrain even more than it would have otherwise.
Thanks, Simon. Hey, I've got I see this jobs and climate plan with the younger voters is so important. And as you say, we're swimming with the tide, but it's fundamentally an economic message, right? And the economy is the one area where, when I look at polling, Trump is either close or edging above Biden, and it's illogical. but it reminds me of the presentation that you put together that looks at history going back decades. It's not just Biden versus Trump, it's going way back, that shows that, you know, when Democrats are in control, we all do better on the economy, right? Are you giving any more presentations on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to my separate organization, but if you go to ndn.org, and I'm sorry if it's getting a little dark here, I'm on the East Coast right now, and it got really dark really fast in the last few minutes, but ndn.org has some presentations. But Bill, I want to go back and reinforce something you said. At a strategy level, if you're the Biden campaign and you look at Trump right now, on the question I got asked earlier, how could he get back in the game? How could he win? He only has one area where he is above the high 30s and low 40s, and that's the economy. In some polls, he's up in the high 40s, and others, he's in the mid 40s, but he's in a substantially better place, and it's why he's always talking about the economy, because it's an area of strength for him. At a strategy level, the Biden campaign, if they can take that away from Trump, right? If they can take that down by 3 or 4 points, then the election is functionally over, because it's the only path that he has. And so one of the things I assume you're going to hear from Biden a lot tomorrow night is going to be about his working class roots and being for everyday people and helping get the country out of the Great Recession, right? I assume that the Biden campaign is going to spend a third to half of its final monies on positive economic messaging about the things we're going to do for people. And I believe they have the power to take away that advantage or that strength that Trump has with the advertising, the money they have. And the message they're going to be running on is essentially the same message that this project discovered, you know, back in the spring, right? So it just means that the backdrop to our work is going to be reinforcing and making the ability to convey and reach these voters. It's going to be easier based on the direction that the Biden campaign sort of is going, and frankly, just has to go. Right? It's the obvious place that they have to go in the closing months.
So we are coming into the hour. As I said, Simon's going to need to run, but we'll stick around if there's other questions, certainly around the CaPA work. But I want to kind of do a last call for a question for Simon. This is a really great opportunity to get to talk to a very influential political actor. Who's got a lot of insight. So I would encourage some of the 60-some people still on the call to.
I'm going to turn on a light, by the way, just while we're here.
Okay, we've got Daniel here. I'm going to allow you to talk, Daniel. Go ahead.
Sure.
Thanks. Yeah, the question for Simon in relation to the ambivalent youth. And I'm curious, you know, what struck me, I'm in my mid-30s, and a lot of my colleagues and peers that are around my age group are particularly frustrated with the divisions in the country, not just between left and right, but also within the Democratic Party. And you mentioned, you know, it's part of the presentation about ambivalent youth referenced that kind of the unity message is a strong message to reaching these voters. I'm curious how you're thinking about the divisions within the party, assuming that a Biden campaign is successful and Democrats take control. There seems to be this foreboding sense of a gulf being created between the progressive left and the kind of moderate center of the party. Curious how you're thinking about that, and especially in relation to kind of this ambivalent youth and those of us that would appreciate more of a unifying message, even beyond just the anti-Trump you know, series of you know, the next you know, 6 to 8 weeks.
It's a great question, and Bill, I'm going to let you start just reviewing this part of the findings, because I think it's actually one of the more counterintuitive you found, right, for this audience, and then I'll wrap around the other end and comment on it.
Yeah, because we all come into this with a very, you know, partisan, very you know, we've got a lot of energy around the issues and so forth. And in our research, it was just very clear that any messaging whatsoever that was blaming and shaming, finger pointing, was a real turnoff. It repelled them. They tuned out. They sensed an agenda. It didn't matter what the agenda was. They didn't want to hear it. They just wanted to hear about solutions, about working together. You know, why can't we all just move forward in a more positive, productive fashion. Now, our research was really looking more at, you know, laying the troubles of the day at the feet of the Trump administration. We weren't really investigating divisions within the Democratic Party necessarily. I would surmise that there's a similar sentiment. So Dan, your question is really great. Now, Simon, you're a lot closer to what's going on within the Democratic Party, so I'm eager to hear your perspective.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to give kind of a political answer to this because at the end of the day, we don't really know what's going to happen. I just don't think there is a huge appetite for us to fight with one another. And I don't think it's just Trump either. I think that if we win and we win the Senate and we win the House, there is going to be an overwhelming sense of obligation to do to get things done for people who need things to get done for them, right? And whether it's fixing healthcare, dealing with climate, right? And there will be ideological debates. That's our democracy. That's built in. That's a given to the system. I think what's important about Biden and the reason why you've seen Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and sort of folks who are not part of his wing of the party, whatever wing I think Joe Biden's really kind of a Democrat, right? More than he is anything else. But I think it's because they feel like Joe Biden's a fair-minded guy and he's going to give everybody a hearing. And that he may not agree, but that you're going to get your ability to make your case. And I think it's why so many Republicans are supporting him too, is that they feel that he's fair-minded. And so I do think this idea that he can work with anybody to bring people together, the theme of the convention tonight is going to be around unity, is going to be really powerful. It's a superpower that Biden has, I think, in the sense that he's a good man and he's close to John McCain. He's also working with Bernie. I do think these fissures always exist. There's always tensions. And the most important thing is that and I was a Clinton guy, so I was in the middle of a lot of these ideological fights in the 90s, is that I'll just conclude by saying what's important is that everyone's got to get wins. It's just not everyone's going to get wins all the time. And how the groups that don't get wins all the time, right, manage that is going to be an interesting thing. But I do think, remember, Joe Biden won the primary. There were, kind of true progressives in this race who didn't do well, right, in a Democratic audience. And so I do think that one of the misperceptions is that the Democratic Party has run left or is becoming more progressive. I don't really believe that's true. I think that at the core, Democrats are pragmatists. Why? Because we want government to work for everybody. We're not a deeply ideological party in many ways. I think that part of the reason that Clinton and Obama were so successful in governing is they focused on things working for everyday people. I'm sorry it's so dark. I'm going to wrap up at that point because I don't even know if you can see me anymore. And the lights in here didn't really work. I'm at a place on the Eastern Shore. It's not our normal house, but it's not, I don't know my way around here. But listen, it's really been a pleasure to be with all of you. I'm really proud of the work that David and Bill and Emilia and Greg have done. Please consider, if you haven't decided to give, please give. And also tell all your friends, right? We can do some of viral marketing ourselves. I appreciate everyone who's stepped up on the chat and has given tonight. It's really been inspiring. But this is the key. Do not wake up on election day thinking about, I should have written another check. I should have made 5 more phone calls, right? We got to leave it all on the playing field, everybody. This is it. Do, whatever you're going to give more. However much time you're going to give more. We got to go for it here. Go on offense and win this thing big for Joe Biden and for the country. Thanks, everybody.
Hey, thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Simon. Really appreciate having you as part of this team and being able to help present today. We will keep the hand raise open. If anyone has some burning questions about our work, there's a couple more kind of technical questions about donating. If any of those are left unanswered, certainly reach out to me at greg@cleanprosperousamerica.org. You can also call my cell phone, 206-979-1707. We will make sure to figure out the best pathway as noted, we can accept funds for a C3 donation. So if you're looking to do tax deductible donations, we can accept those. That'll limit our ability to, those grants need to really go strictly to registration work, and we're focusing a lot of that on vote by mail work. And then if you can give non-political, or if you can give political donations, that will really help us because that is much more flexible funds. So if you're using the online link, it'll automatically go into our PAC. If you would like to do a tax deductible donation, please reach out to me directly via email. And if you have any questions, we had one coming in about donating out of an advisory fund. I believe we can accept money from an advisory fund. I don't see any reason not. We are able to accept money from PACs, C4s, individuals, just about any sort of formation, being that we have both the Low Carbon Prosperity Institute, which is an arm of Washington Business Alliance Fund, which is a C3. We have a C4 that is CaPA, and we also have the CaPA PAC. So we really can handle all forms of donations. So if you have any questions, just give me a call. And it is looking like the DAFs can only give to 501c3s. So let's touch bases on that because we certainly have pathways. ACE, one of our big grantees from the first round, and we really are really happy with their work. They are a C3 org, so we can direct quite a bit of tax deductible money towards them if that is your desire. So last call for some questions. If not, oh, we got one more question here. Go ahead, John.
Okay, unmuted now. I have a very good friend that I've sent this information to, who is a Democrat, that is a really large donor to the Lincoln Project. I wonder what your thoughts are with respect to arguments that we can have that show what we're doing here, you and David and so forth are doing, versus donations to the Lincoln Project.
I can provide some thoughts. And Bill, I know you track the Lincoln Project quite closely. So, we love what they're doing. I think it's quite a bit different than what we're doing. So I'll let Bill maybe expand a little bit on that.
Yeah, I love the Lincoln Project, but I think they would say the same thing I would say, which is that the message has to fit the audience. They would also say that they have an audience of one, which is why they do so much of their place so much of their advertising in Washington, D.C., hoping to catch the rabbit ears on top of the White House. But even beyond that, they are, of course, hoping to catch the attention of repentant Republicans who may be rethinking their vote this time around. Our research, of course, is with a different sort of voter. I think our voter would overlap, the ambivalent young voters in non-urban areas would overlap somewhat with the target audience of Republican voters against Trump, which is another Republican group that's running a lot of advertising. And their approach fits much more closely with what we heard in our research, which is that Trump bashing doesn't work. What does work is peer-to-peer people talking about their own experience, their own perspective. And so you'll see ads from Republican voters against Trump where they just sit in front of the camera, sit in front of the of their iPhone and say, listen, I voted for Trump last time. It was a mistake. Here's been my experience. This is why I'm voting for the Democrats this time around. And that's the approach that we heard resonate with the ambivalent young voters.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I just add something to that real quick, Bill. I think that's absolutely spot on. And I would just want to highlight one of the really interesting grant proposals that we've received for the second round, just from an organization called Vote Common Good working in North Carolina. And they're doing exactly that. They're a faith-based organization, and what they're focused on is reaching out to young rural Christian voters, many from conservative backgrounds. And the way they framed it is they're saying they're looking for an exit ramp from supporting Trump this time around. And so they are crafting messaging to tap into the values of faith and voting for the common good to give those folks an honorable exit ramp to leave the Trump train and vote against him this time around. And I just thought that was a really interesting approach, but I think that is a lot of overlap with the same sort of work that both the Lincoln Project is doing, and that some of the ambivalent youth voters we talk to are in that position as well, of being a former Trump supporter or a conservative backgrounds and that are looking to vote against him with a way that still fits with their values this time around.
I'll just add that it's really very much the case that when Republicans complain against Mr. Trump, it's far better than when Democrats do it. So the Lincoln Project is by Republicans, towards Republicans, about their chief Republican, and that's where the bashing should occur. And we can spend all of the rest of our time on the positive messages of what the new administration, the new government will do, and that's the opportunity to lead before being elected. And to the extent that Joe and Kamala and hopefully others that show up on the docket, on the dais with them as the leadership for the new administration, the greater the enthusiasm for that outcome.
So there's a question coming in about, how is the donor drive going? We have received a lot of texts. I have not been able to keep track of them to the level of accumulating them. But I think there has been great participation. I've seen at least 25 people say that they've given something, which is really exciting. And to be able to leverage those dollars towards that 2-to-1 match is fantastic. I don't think we're at a level where we're going to hit our $100,000 match today. But we've got a little bit of a fuse on that matching run. So we will be continuing to drive towards that $100,000 donor drive over the next week. So certainly if you know anyone that would like to contribute to this cause, please make sure you're sharing some of our materials and emphasizing really from you. What we have seen from all of our research and all of our experience working with grantees, and there's a ton of data out there right now that peer-to-peer contact is what works. Everyone is so sick of this political world and the noise that goes on. And for us to solicit someone cold just isn't going to work. But if you've heard this, you've bought in, you think it's exciting, maybe you don't have the capacity to really elevate a grant proposal, take the time to reach out to some people you know in your network and spend 1 to 2 minutes on the phone with them explaining why you think this is a good cause and why it's worth donating, because there's going to be no better salesman than you, one of their friends and family, to try to get them to support this work. Any questions? Final questions? Okay, with that, I'm going to let you close the door, David.
Thank you, Greg. And thank you, friends and colleagues, for participating in our webinar and considering our work. I'm asking you now to invest in our work, become part of the movement that we're building, to take the methods and content that CaPA PAC has developed and turn that into the biggest reality possible at the election. We're using the same methodologies, Bill and I, that we used when we turned Sonicare into the fastest growing privately held company in the US, without the use of big ads and without a lot of investor money. These methods work. Now, we didn't know if they would work in the political environment, and we're very grateful to you, Simon, for helping us back last year when we were just trying to figure this thing out, teaching us, taking us to school and showing us about national politics, giving us advice and contacts and feedback as we proceeded so we could rapidly become productive. We used original research and found our way to this rather stunning population group of 30 million youth that are ambivalent and are not living where Democrats have traditionally been strong. They live outside the major cities. Yet they want to get involved, and most of them lean in our direction. So we just need to find them and make friends with them and let them talk to each other and facilitate the natural processes that they are already undertaking. And that's why the organizations of youth for youth can work so well. We're focusing on the states that really count and the races within them that have the maximum impact. We are using the existing orgs and giving them more than just money. We're giving them campaign management experience. We have experienced campaign managers on the CaPA staff to help them. We're giving them access to state-of-the-art tools to make them more productive. One woman told us that her organization is about 4 times as productive now that she's using our tools than before. And interestingly, most of these organizations are run by women. We love the fact that so many of these are going after population groups that are underserved, like Indigenous people. So leveraging also includes the use of other organizations in the space, the big ones like American Bridge, League of Conservation Voters, EDF Action, PAC. Thank you, Joe, for your help and your generosity along the way. All of these organizations from the very beginning told us you can have everything we have that's of value. We'll give you our research. We'll give you our messaging. We'll give you access to ads that we run. We'll give you advice, data, anything that can help you be successful. I guess they saw something in what we were doing and were hopeful. It's a spirit of cooperation that was frankly stunning. That organizations that have been around for decades and spend hundreds of millions of dollars on an election cycle would reach out to a small little group and help them succeed. I'm so glad that we were able to bring back something of real substance in terms of the target audience, our characterization of it through our research, and our organizational approach to serving them. We've also leveraged the power of the Get Out to Vote organizations that have been doing a really good job of signing people up. But people need to be wanting to be signed up for that to work. So we're working ahead of them. They're very productive, well-funded. What we're doing is working the rate limiting process, which is getting youth interested and excited about voting, hooking them up with organizations that can then carry them the rest of the distance. Further leveraging your investment because we're working on the rate limiting process. Overall, the collection of tactics being used is giving you the greatest opportunity to take whatever money you can spend tonight and maximize the effect that you're going to have on the election. But it's actually more than the election because we're investing in these organizations that are going to persist after the election. Continue to work with the youth, continue to cultivate them so they're engaged in participating in an even bigger way by the time we get to the midterm elections in 2 years, where there's going to be this huge retaliatory response from the losers. We have to be prepared to take territory that Democrats, progressives have not held before and put strength in place in order to keep them going in our direction. By working with the youth over the next 10 years, let's say, we can take people who are in their early 20s who were quite valuable. They voted twice for President Obama and then for President Trump, many of them. Most of them lean towards our values, though. So by hooking them up with appropriate organizational methods, they'll feel good and participate. So by the time they get into their 30s, their political points of view will already be framed for a lifetime, thereby allowing us to change the future of American politics. We need to stop from happening again what we're experiencing. We need to stop the advent of totalitarianism in our society by building power among those people, young people, who inherently resist that kind of outcome. So invest in both the election and also the future by spending big tonight. This is the time. Now, speaking of time, some people might say, well, isn't it too late? The answer is no. The election cycle's basically gotten postponed rather significantly by the COVID-19 pandemic. People are now waking up from that, pulling themselves out of it and getting more involved in politics. This is the right time to be doing exactly what we're doing. The grants that we're funding through your funds will be those projects that were written up in just the last couple of weeks. This is very current. This is the time to make the push. And your investment money is being leveraged because we're covering the overhead already. 100% of your money is going to go into the field. And now it's matched, so it's going to be twice as effective. So CaPA is a great opportunity to be able to say, I've done everything possible to make this election as successful as we can, so that we can all wake up the day after the election with big smiles on our face and go, high five, we've done a really good job. So please invest and also tell your friends, because this is a movement. It needs to have broad and deep participation in our community. Our community deserves this kind of work. Thank you so much for your generosity. Now, the way to participate is to use our chat. Tell us what it is you would like to do. You can use the donate button. You can also send a check to CaPA PAC, or Clean and Prosperous America PAC, at Post Office Box 98, Mercer Island 98040. Thanks for being part of this movement.